Scouting in Football Manager has changed quite a lot over the last few years, and it can be quite confusing. We've had a lot of comments of people asking for us to make a video all about scouting, so today we're going to do exactly that, breaking down the basics as well as some advanced tips so you know everything about scouting top to bottom to give you the best chance of finding those Wonderkids and star players in your save. That's right, today we'll be breaking down everything you need to know about scouting in FM24, but before we get into it, just like to take a second to ask you guys to be absolute legends for us and smash the like button. It really does help the videos out in terms of their performance. Comment down below if you think we've missed anything or what kind of tutorials you'd like to see next, and subscribe if you haven't already. We're pushing very close to 170k subscribers, so any support to that number would be massively appreciated. I feel like I've said appreciated a few times there, but don't worry, the plugs are all done. The first place we're going to start with scouting, of course, has to be your scouts. Now, these are the guys that will go out there and fetch reports on players that you don't know much about in your save. If you want to know anything about your scouts, head to the staff section, and then they'll be in the recruitment team here, highlighted as scouts. We've got 7 out of 10 scouts here. The more scouts you have, the more scouting assignments we can set up. We'll talk more about them later, and the more player reports we can get in a faster time frame. Now, we've got 7 scouts here. As mentioned, if you wanted to get more scouts, you can either go to the staff search screen and try and find one yourself, or you can place an advert for a scout if you're missing one. People will then apply for the job, and you can choose the best scout possible. But how do we know who is a good scout and who is a bad scout? Craig Johnson here isn't the best scout, and I'll talk about why. Now, 3 attributes make up a good scout: adaptability, judging player ability, and judging player potential, all highlighted by the game for you so you don't have to remember. The last 2 of those are quite self-explanatory. The better a scout judging player ability, that will determine how good he is at providing a report about how good a player is currently, and judging player potential is how good that player could be. The rating is between 1 and 20. The higher it is to 20, the more accurate these reports will be, and the more you can rely on them. It doesn't mean Craig Johnson will be wrong every single time. He's just less reliable than a scout with better ability in those areas. Adaptability is the interesting one though. The higher this rating, the better a scout is at adapting to a new nation when they are out there scouting. Now, Craig Johnson has an extensive knowledge of England, so if we sent him to an English division to scout, he wouldn't really be affected by his adaptability because he already knows the area. If we sent Craig here though to Saudi Arabia to scout, he doesn't know anything about that area, so the higher his adaptability, the quicker he will come to grips with that new area, and the faster he'll be able to provide you with scout reports. So if you're sending your scouts to faraway nations that they know nothing about, try and make sure you're sending the ones with the better adaptability to foreign nations, and the ones with less adaptability, keep them in the scouting range where they already have a good knowledge of. If you had an Italian scout who knew everything about Italy, he might be the best option to send on an Italian scouting job. You get the idea. Now, once you have your scout set up, they will go out there and provide you with scout reports. If you come to the scouting section and go to overview, this is where your reports will come in. You get told some information on this screen: a player's position, their predicted transfer value, as well as the scout's recommendation and their knowledge. The more knowledge they have of a player, the more accurate their attributes will be. You'll commonly see it if you don't have full knowledge on a player, that you might know half of their attributes, but half of their attributes are still unknown. The longer you scout a player for, the more you'll know about him, and then you'll get a more accurate report. Now, you can filter here based on your scout's recommendations. The higher a scout's recommendation, the more likely they are to be a good signing for your team. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the better the recommendation, the better the player is. Not quite so, because a scout isn't just taking into account a player's ability. They'll be looking at everything from their eligibility of being a homegrown player. They'll be looking at their current form, as well as how easily they're going to settle into your squad. So they're not always checking ability, so make sure you don't completely blindly trust these scout reports, but generally they are a very good guide in terms of which players are better here. So there's a good chance for Kundo Buononte is going to be a better signing for us than, say, Jack Clark here at Sunderland. Now, if you click this rating here, this A rating, you will get the scouts report on the player, his ability, his potential, as well as some pros and cons about him. You can see here, this is exactly what I mean. One of the main pros of Buononte is that he's under 21, so we don't have to register him, and he's transfer listed. Now, as good as that is to know, it doesn't necessarily mean that he is going to be a better player than someone that might have got a B rating or a C rating. These are just the scout's opinions, and again, the better a scout is in terms of their judging player ability and potential, the more accurately we can judge these reports. No matter the time of the season, you'll constantly be getting these reports. But how do we get them? Well, they come from Recruitment Focuses, but before we get to them, we need to talk about the finances behind scouting. You can see here you have a scouting budget. If you want to put more money towards it, you can use this slider here, commit some of your transfer budget to the scouting budget, and pretty simply, it says it here, the scouting budget will be used for your scouting packages as well as any individual scouting trips outside of your permitted scouting range. What is your scouting range? Well, it's this one to the left here. This is the package that you can get for your team. The worst package covers a certain area. The more money you commit towards these packages, the wider your scouting range will be. If you commit to a European package, you'll cover all the players in Europe, and if you commit to a world package, the most expensive, you'll have all of the players available to you to scout. Now you can see here for a season, the world package will cost us 360,000, so you want to make sure in your scouting budget you have got that much at the start of the year. You can see our initial season budget is there at 390, so we had enough to pay for that world budget and still have 30,000 left over for any scouting trips outside of our scouting range. Now if you've got the world scouting range, there are no trips outside of that range. However, if you had a European scouting package, let's say we did that, and then we decided, you know what, I want to go and scout someone in Argentina, that's going to take a little bit out of your scouting budget, as you're going to need to fund the scouts trip over there to go and watch that player. Now there's two main ways that your scouts will go out there and find players for you. The first one is if you just searched a name. Let's say we go for Lionel Messi. Obviously we're going to have a scout report on him, but if we didn't, we could go ahead, go to reports, and then scout player for a week, or scout until full knowledge, whatever you want to do. That's one way that you can get a scout report on a player. But obviously you're not going to know every single player in your save, and that's your scout's job to kind of find that information for you. So what you can do is send scouts out on assignments to find these players for you. You will see they're called recruitment focuses, and we have some here, one in the UK and Ireland, one in Europe, England, Spain, Germany, the Premier League. They were self-generated, I didn't do them, but the one that I did create is the Wonderkids recruitment focus. Now with your recruitment focuses, you can focus in on a specific position if you really need to sign a goalkeeper, let's say, or you can focus on general scouting as a whole. So let's show you how to do both of them. If you go to the recruitment focus section, either by clicking this button here, recruitment focuses, or by going up to the top and then selecting recruitment focus, you can go ahead and see all the results of each different focus. So this Premier League one here, if we go to this pencil, it looks like they're looking for anyone with decent ability, any position in the Premier League that could be a good sign-in. They've got a bunch here, some are good, some are bad. But what if you want to create one of these focuses for yourself? Well, you're going to click this create recruitment focus button. From here, you'll get a bunch of different filters that we can set up when looking for a player. Now, the two common types of scouting you'll do is one, looking for a specific player for your team. To do this, you would go ahead and click, say, defensive midfielder. Let's say we're looking for one of those. And then it will also highlight the role that that player plays. So a segundo volante is the defensive midfielder in our tactic. Now, if you wanted to search for that, you can do, or you can search for, say, an anchor, ball-winning midfielder, whatever you like, or maybe even a replacement for a specific player. If you search for the role, what this will do is look for players that have the attributes for the role needed of segundo volante. And if you search for, say, a replacement for Ethan Ampadu, it will try and find players with similar attributes to Ethan Ampadu. You can then call your recruitment focus something. So let's say it's volante here because that's what we're after. And then you can set some requirements about your players. Are you after them on loan? Are you after them for transfer, or either? Let's say you wanted to sign someone on a transfer deal. You can then filter reports based on a player's ability. Let's say we were looking for a younger player, maybe one that's not quite ready for the first team yet, but could be in the future. We could keep this current ability to 2 stars, but we want them to have at least 3.5 star potential under the age of, let's say, 21. That's then going to filter for players under the age of 21 that hit our requirements. Currently, that's going to be in any area in the world. Your scouts will go around and just look anywhere they can until they find these players. It can take a long while, or if you want to scout somewhere specific, you can go ahead and pick a specific nation. Obviously, we've only got the European package here, so we can only scout Europe, but if we change this to world, we could go elsewhere. Now, I spoke about this in last year's scouting video, but it used to be a few years back that the best thing to do is just scout a region. Let's say Europe, and then Eastern Europe, Central Europe. Send a scout to each different region, and they'd search all the nations in that area and bring you back reports. But when I was doing this in FM23, and I'm sure it applies in FM24 as well, it wasn't really working for me. And the reason is these scouts were looking in, say, South America for these young players, but they weren't looking in the right places. So they were spending months in, say, Bolivia, Chile, which you might find the odd gem here or there, but realistically, they weren't really going to find anyone of note. So I found it better to send them to specific nations, say Argentina, Brazil, because you know over there's going to be a wider pool of talent just based on your general football knowledge of where the best players tend to come from in game. But you can choose wherever you like. I would always suggest nation scouting if you're looking for something specific. So maybe we want to check in the German divisions for a player here, hit confirm, and then you have the choice of your scouting priority. Now, ongoing, we'll look for these players for the course of your save. Now, if you're looking for a specific position, this probably doesn't make sense. You can use ongoing for a different type of scouting focus that we'll cover in a second. Here, though, if you were looking for a defensive midfielder, you could go to standard, that will look for a Segundo Volante for us for about 2 or 3 weeks, I believe, until they find players that meet our requirements, or maybe they might not find anyone at all. Now, top priority will make it the top priority. They'll get quicker results for you. Your scouts will pull all your resources together to try and find players for this position. Now, if you're heading towards a transfer deadline, this can be something that's very beneficial to you. If you really need to find players fast, this could be the way to go. But let's keep it to standard for now, and then you can even choose the scout that you want to do this scouting trip. Now, as mentioned, we're going to Germany here. So firstly, I'd be looking to see if we had any German scouts, because there's a good chance they will know more about the Germany area. It doesn't look like we do, but maybe one of our scouts has good knowledge of Germany. So if we hover over their world knowledge, we can see Craig Dean knows England, New Zealand, Republic of Ireland, Iceland, Finland and Malta, but nothing about Germany. What about Gabby Ruiz here? Well, he has an extensive knowledge of Germany, so he'd be a good option to send out to the German divisions to try and find a player for us. We're also going to take into effect his adaptability. If he didn't know anything about Germany, that would help him when looking for a player. So if you wanted to, you could select him and send him out on a scouting job, and that would look for a defensive midfielder for you. But what if you want to look for players in general, like this one that I've got here? I've already set one up called Wonderkids. I set this up myself. I recommend all of you set up a Wonderkid or youth filter here. I'll guide you through how I set this up, but this has pulled back so many great gems for me in this lead save, which by the way is a rebuild that we did on my channel, which you can find linked in the description if you want to check it out. Any support over there would be massively appreciated, and I'm sure you'll really enjoy the content. But yes, first thing I've done is look for any position from our tactic. That will find any players that hit all of our other filters that play in any position in our tactic. But if you want to go even broader than that, you can go here to this drop down and click any. That will basically find any player from any position that hits our Wonderkid range. And our Wonderkid range that I've set up is 2 stars to 4 stars. That'll mean they've got at least 2-star current ability, but they have a potential of 4 stars or higher, bringing back the best of the best who are available for transfer between the ages of 15 and 23. I would set this to an ongoing priority, so it's going throughout the course of your save. If you want to, you can leave it as that, set the areas to any, and over time you'll start to get some reports back. Or maybe you want to make this recruitment focus 10 times over and call one, say, Argentinian Wonderkids, next Brazilian Wonderkids, the next one Serbian Wonderkids, and send all of these scouts to those areas, one to Brazil, one to Serbia. That way you'll cover more areas at a faster rate. Over time you'll get some recommendations back, as we've had here, but sometimes you'll find players that don't quite hit your criteria but are close, and they'll come under this near matches section. Always a good idea to check here. I'll give you some information about why they were only a near match and not a complete match. For example, a lot of these players didn't hit our current ability check, but the scouts recommend them still as decent options. So you can take a look at these guys, and then you've got the in progress ones. These are the ones where the scouts are still judging them to see 1, if they're rubbish, 2, if they're a recommendation, or 3, they are a near match. When a scouting focus is complete, say it's one where you had it as a top priority, after 2 weeks or so, that scouting focus will be done. It will go into the completed section, and then you'll be able to look there at all of the options that came up at that time. They're all dated too. But if you don't want to keep up with your recruitment focuses, the easiest thing to do is just go to your scouting center, and every time a player hits one of your recruitment focuses, they will come through into this section here, and you'll have an option of buttons to click, whether you want to scout them further, not scout them anymore, or just take note of that scout by hitting the tick button and saying thank you for that report. Maybe it'll be of use to you later. Now you can do this in this card format and go through each and every player, clicking on them, deciding what you want to do with each player, as I've done here. Or the easiest way is to go to the list section, because then this will list all of your players out. You can then filter based on your scout's rating. Maybe when you want to look at the players with an A or higher, you can then go through and get rid of anyone with a B. You can do this just by clicking a player and then choosing the X button on them, or you could go ahead and scout some further. That's one of my first little tips and tricks anyway, to skip over to the list section. I think it's so much easier to get an idea of who your scouts have found this way than it is clicking through every single report. Whether you go ahead and dismiss a report or acknowledge it, either way, these players are going to appear in your scouted players section. This will have every single player that you've scouted in your save. No matter which recruitment focus they came in, they'll all be listed together, and then you can go ahead and filter based on specific requirements. For example, here we've got players who are interested in a transfer at least a doubtful level. Let's say you wanted a left back. That'll then bring back anyone that we've scouted who is a left back. We can go through and filter by potential, by transfer value, by their current wage, whatever you want to do. Going into the scouted players section brings back any player that you've scouted, but some people prefer to play the game slightly differently and kind of manually scout players themselves. And if you want to do this, you can do this by going to players in range. Some people will say this isn't the right way to play, it's not super realistic because you only want players that your scouts have brought to you, but it's completely up to you. This will bring back every player in your range should you want to search that way, but like I said, not all of them will be scouted. Now again, you can filter down some of these searches. Let's say you wanted to look for a left back, you can do so. If there's a specific role that you want them to play, let's say wing back, you can search for that by doing something like this. This is looking for anyone who've hit 16 out of the 19 requirements to be a wingback at a level of 15 or higher, or at least could potentially have that level. For example, if we check out Archie Brown, because he's not fully scouted, they don't know whether he does hit those requirements or not. That's the downside to just doing this player search function as opposed to scouting them manually. But yes, you can go ahead and take this down a little bit if you want. Maybe you want to look for players under the age of 24, let's say, and you want to make sure that the attributes are at least 13. Maybe you want them to hit more than 16. Maybe you want them to hit 17 out of these 19 attributes needed to be a wingback. Then we've got 4 players here that we could potentially go ahead and scout. They might hit our requirements, they might not. Not all of them will have a scout report as mentioned, so we don't really know if they hit the requirements that we're after here. Another tip and trick that might help you guys out though is say you're losing a player. In this Leeds team, we've got Wilfried Gnonto. You can go to this Find Similar Player button and search his name. What this will do is bring back anyone with a similar name. Let's see if I can remember how to spell Gnonto. There we go. I haven't, but it's came up anyway. And then you can click that. That'll bring back any players that have similar key attributes to Wilfried Gnonto. It said that dribbling, acceleration, agility, and balance are some of the best parts of Gnonto's game as a striker, and it's brought back a bunch of players that could potentially be replacements for him. We could now scout these and see if they're any good. This is also useful if you just really like a player and you want to find someone similar to them. Like if we type in Lionel Messi here, for example, it's going to look for anyone with similar attributes to Lionel Messi, at least some of his key attributes anyway. Odegaard, Jamal Musiala, Kulusevski, Joe Willock as well, who would have thought he'd be compared to Lionel Messi. But yes, that feature can be really useful, particularly if you're about to lose a player to a transfer and you want to replace them quickly or find players that could potentially replace them. As you can see, we've got a recommendation here to make this a recruitment focus, which we can do. So we've gone through the scouting center, we've gone through the players in range and scouted players. We've talked about the budgets and a recruitment focus. There's only a couple things left to cover. These are things if you want to go really in depth with your save, they might help you. Scout priorities is one. This shows you the priority of where certain players are being scouted. So currently our top priority is to scout this guy, Moritz Nicholas, and this is based on when you ask for these scout reports. We must have asked for Nicholas's scout report before we did Sarpreet Singh's, but if you wanted to get Sarpreet Singh's recommendation faster, you can move him up in the priority list by drag and dropping like so. Now he is a top priority and we'll get a report on him quickly. This can be really useful if you find a player that you might have 2 days left on the deadline of the transfer window and you want to know should I sign them or not. Well, let's say Fabian Reese here, you could quickly bring him to the top and then he will be scouted quicker. That way you can determine at a faster rate if he's right for you or if he's not the right transfer to sign. And the final thing we're going to cover is the scouting coverage. Now this will give you a map and tell you where we're scouting currently. So as you can see, most of our scouts are in the UK and that is the only part of the map that is highlighted. That just kind of tells you where you're scouting now though, so it isn't really the most beneficial in the world, but the world knowledge tab can be quite useful. This will tell you your knowledge of certain areas of the world. For example, we know lots about the UK and Ireland, Western Europe and Northern Europe. We know little bits about South Asia, but there's some areas of the world we know absolutely nothing about. So some of the lower parts of Africa, we've got no knowledge on at all. So maybe we'd like to send some scouts there. This scouting knowledge comes from your scouts themselves. So the more scouts you've got, the more knowledge they've got of the world, the more scouting knowledge you'll have. That means if you sent scouts to areas that you already know something about, the quicker they'll pick up the region, the quicker they'll be able to get you scout reports, which is going to help you in the future. So try and make sure you're diversifying your scouts so you've got knowledge of as many areas as possible. But realistically, it's very hard to get scouting knowledge of absolutely everywhere. And there's some areas that just aren't really worth scouting that heavily. You've got much better chances of finding Wonderkids in Brazil and Argentina than you have, say, Belarus, for example. So just bear that in mind. So there you go, a whistle-stop tour of scouting covering the basics, the things that only more advanced players are probably going to be bothered about, and also some tips and tricks along the way. If you have found it useful, smash the like button for me. Comment down below if you've got any questions at all, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.